if Fin had only now spoken, he said, "Something like it happened a long time ago, Fin. Before you or I were born. Sometime back in the 50s, over at Macaskill." "I don't understand. What do you mean?" Fin was filled with confusion. "Same thing. Postie used to pass a loch on the track between Macaskill and Kinloch Resort every morning. Way out in the middle of bloody nowhere it was. Loch Nanliarga. So one morning he's coming down the track as usual and there's no loch. Just a big hole where it used to be. I've passed it many times myself. Caused a hell of a stir back then, though. The newspaper and television people came all the way up from London, and the things they speculated on, well, they seem crazy now, but they filled the airwaves and the column inches of the papers at the time. The favourite was that the loch had been hit by a meteor and evaporated. And what had happened? Whistler lifted his shoulders, then dropped them again. "Best theory is that it was a bog burst." "Which is what?" Whistler made a moo with his lips, his eyes still drawn to the slime-filled basin of the disappeared loch. "Well, it can happen when you get a long spell without rain. Not very common here." He nearly smiled. "The surface peat dries up and cracks, and as any peat cutter knows, once it's dry, the peat becomes impervious to water." He nodded towards where the giant slug trail led off into the mist. "There's another loch down there, lower in the valley. If I had any money, I'd put it on this one having drained down into the other." "How?" "Most of these lochs sit on peat lying over Lewisian gneiss. Quite often they're separated by ridges of something less stable, like amphibolite. When the dry spell is followed by heavy rain, like last night, the rainwater runs through the cracks in the peat, creating a layer of sludge above the bedrock. Chances are that what happened here is that the peat between the lochs simply slid away on the sludge. The weight of the water in the upper loch burst through the amphibolite, and the whole bloody lot drained down the valley." There was a stirring of air as the sun edged a little higher, and the mist lifted just a touch. Enough to reveal something white and red catching the light at what must have been the deepest part of the loch. "What the hell's that?" Fin said, and when Whistler made no reply, "Do you have binoculars?" "In my rucksack." Whistler's voice was little more than a breath. Fin hurried back to their beehive and crawled inside to find Whistler's binoculars. When he got out to the ridge again, Whistler hadn't moved. He continued to stare impassively at the hole where the loch had once been. Fin raised the binoculars to his eyes and adjusted the lenses until the red and white object came clearly into focus. "Jesus," he heard himself whisper, quite involuntarily. It was a small single-engined aircraft, cradled among a cluster of boulders and lying at a slight angle. It appeared to be pretty much intact. The windows of the cockpit were opaque with mud and slime, but the red and white of the fuselage was clearly visible, as were the black-painted letters of its call sign, G-R-U-A-I. Fin felt every hair on the back of his neck stand up. R-U-A-I, short for Ruari, the Gaelic for Roderick, a call sign which had been in every newspaper for weeks, 17 years before, when the plane went missing, and Roddy Mackenzie with it. Mist lifted off the mountains like smoke, tinted by the dawn. It was perfectly still. Not a sound broke the silence. Not even a bird call. Fin lowered Whistler's binoculars. "You know whose plane that is?" Whistler nodded. "What the hell's it doing here, Whistler? They said he filed a flight plan for Mull and disappeared somewhere out at sea." Whistler shrugged but made no comment. Fin said, "I'm going down to take a look." Whistler caught his arm. There was an odd look in his eyes. If Fin hadn't known better, he would have said it was fear. "We shouldn't." "Why?" "Because it's none of our business, Fin." He sighed, a long, grim breath of resignation. "I suppose we'll have to report it, but we shouldn't get involved."